Hi, welcome back. This is, I hope, the last of the recordings on the this series on project structure, file naming, and so on. The last thing I want to talk about is this question of where do your projects live? So far what I've talked about is at the bottom level, like the finest level of structure I wanted to talk about is how do you name an individual file? What I went through in the last video was how do I organize a bunch of files into a project. The last kind of organization I want to talk about is kind of at a higher level of abstraction, which is how do I organize the projects themselves? Where do all my projects live? And this is something where I don't have as much concrete guidance for this as I do for some of the other things, but I'll go through a few things that I think you should think about when trying to keep a collection of projects organized in some fashion. Okay, so first off, I want to kind of get back to talking about file paths. I know that this is like the least interesting thing, but you want to think about where are things on your computer. So everything every file on a computer has a path, a complete path, which is its full listing from the very beginning. For example, every user on your computer has their own home folder, right? So that's the one that contains all of your documents, your desktop, your downloads, all those sorts of folders. Those are all in your user folder, and that has its own absolute path, right? On Windows, if my username is Danielle, the path to my home folder is something like c:/users/Danielle. On a Mac, there's no analog of so the c:, usually means something like the hard drive. That's not quite what it means, but it's good enough for now. On a Mac, it's just something like you just have a slash. It just starts with a slash and then it says users, then /Danielle. On Ubuntu, it might be something like /home/Danielle. This is my home folder. Everything that belongs to me, Danielle, as the user on this folder, goes inside my user folder. So my projects, one way or another, are going to be inside this, inside the Danielle folder, wherever that might happen to be, depending on what operating system you're on. So the location, regardless of where Danielle is, regardless of the exact address of the user folder, on pretty much, I think on most operating systems, the desktop is almost the username. So Danielle/desktop is the location of the desktop folder. Danielle/downloads is the downloads folder. The place where your browser automatically dumps a whole lot of files even when you didn't expect it to. That's the downloads folder. If you have Dropbox installed on your computer, the location of the Dropbox folder is Danielle/Dropbox, and so on. So there are often default paths for different types of things. So which of these possible locations should I keep all my projects? And I want to say that there's, roughly speaking, there's a good place and then there's bad place. Here are some of the bad places. Do not keep your projects on the desktop. Do not keep them in the downloads folder. Don't mix your work project in with your tax folder files or pictures of your dogs. So keep your project separate from non-projects. And maybe most importantly, don't store your project in a location that doesn't get automatically backed up in some way. The downloads folder, for example, is a great example of something that does not get backed up usually, right? the downloads, things you download from the internet don't automatically say go into your Dropbox. So they won't automatically be backed up often. I mean, again, it depends on how your system is set up. Sometimes it is being backed up, but the point is you want to think about making sure that wherever you choose, your files are being backed up, so that if your computer catches fire for some mysterious reason, then all of your work will not be lost. So places that are not backed up are bad places. Places that mix all your different types of documents together, that's a bad place. And the desktop is definitely a bad place. Don't store things that matter on the desktop. Okay. So, well, what counts as a good place? It depends a lot. Well, the answer to this question depends a lot on who you are and what you need to do. The target audience for these videos is usually a complete beginner, and not, let's say, somebody who's an established software engineer. If you're an established software engineer, quite frankly, I expect you to know the answer to this one already. But let's say you're a student in one of my psychology classes and are trying to think all of this stuff through. A good default is to have a folder inside, one of your cloud services. So for example, if you're a Microsoft person, maybe you're using OneDrive to back things up to the cloud. If you're on a Mac, maybe you're using iCloud. If you started using these things before iCloud and OneDrive exist, maybe you're using Dropbox for everything. That's what I do. I've got a Dropbox folder. So inside my Dropbox folder, which on my Ubuntu system is home/Danielle/Dropbox, I might have a folder called projects. All of my projects are going to go inside this projects folder, so that anytime I'm thinking to myself, I know I'm going to do some work on one of my projects, this is the place I go. Everything belongs inside home/Danielle/Dropbox/projects. The reason I might make that decision is simply that, first off, the Dropbox folder is something in your computer that gets automatically synchronized. So if I work across multiple computers, it will be the same everywhere. As long as you've got an internet connection, the Dropbox app will make sure that all your files are kept synchronized. It also means that they are backed up. So if, let's say, you have only one computer and it suddenly catches fire, well, that's okay. It's already stored on your Dropbox folder. Having that internet backup is generally a very, very good idea. There's a couple of downsides, I think, to these cloud services. One of them might be something like, suppose I've deleted a file and I realize now I need it. I actually need that file I just deleted. How far back in time can I go look in my Dropbox, go back in time and recover files that I've deleted? Generally speaking, cloud services like Dropbox and OneDrive and things like that do let you go back and look at the state of your files as they were a few days ago. I think maybe they go back 30 days. I forget how long it is actually. But it doesn't go back in time very far. So if you need to go back and go, oh, I need to see what things looked like 3 years ago. If your only method of backup is Dropbox, you're out of luck. That's just not, Dropbox isn't designed to do that. Dropbox is not a time machine. And so although your cloud service is very useful for making sure that the current state of your project is backed up and that it is synchronized across multiple machines, it's good for that, but it's not good as a time machine. Oh, another huge plus, these systems just work automatically. Dropbox works in the background without making you have to work very hard. Same thing with OneDrive, same thing with Google Drive, same thing with iCloud. They're all the same that way. They're not hard work, and they buy you a lot. So I should talk about time travel then. Why do I want to go back in time and see the state of my project several months ago, I honestly, most of the reason I'm doing it is that I just wanted an excuse to have a David Tennant gif of him talking about the wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. Gosh, I've got to crush on David Tennant. He's great. Okay, moving on. There are two big reasons why you might want to go back in time and see what your project looked like a year ago, let's say. The first example is, and why I don't have an Arrested Development gif in here is just crazy. But if you've made a huge mistake and you need to just go, you know what? Wipe everything I've done from the last 2 months. I'm going to go back and I'm going to start again. Going backwards in time and rewinding all of your files to their earlier states is super useful when you make mistakes. And I'm going to be honest, I have had to do that many times. So that is one use case for having some kind of time travel device. But another one is something like, what if you just thinking, okay, you know what? I need to document my project. Like, I want to make sure that everybody knows, like, particularly if, say, if you care about things like, the Garden of Forking Paths and making sure that you rigorously document all the things that you've done. Sometimes you just need a reminder of what you were thinking at different points in time. Like, yes, you should be writing all of these things down as you go along. When you're doing projects, keep good notes of everything you've done and all of your thought processes as you go. But again, in practice, I found that sometimes I forget. I don't have everything. So it's super useful to actually just be able to rewind time, go back and just watch as I go, oh, okay, so this is what I was thinking 3 months ago. This is what I was thinking 2 months ago, and so on. You can actually rewind and see those things. If you want that capability, and you often do, the cloud services like Dropbox are not going to buy it for you. They're great. I use them all the time. But if you want this additional time travel capability, you have to have something else as well. So, what else am I going to do to fix this problem? I'm not going to talk about that in a lot of detail, but I'm going to suggest 3 solutions that you might encounter in real life. First off, a really, really common solution to this problem is have a special application for it. So the one that I'm most familiar with is Time Machine, the one that comes bundled with Mac, with an Apple, right? Time Machine is great for exactly this. Like, it lets you go back and revisit your project at different points in time. So Time Machine is good for that. If you are not the world's most technical person, finding an app that actually does this, something like Time Machine, is your best solution. Doesn't require any special skills. All you have to do, is use the app. You may have to purchase something, but that's your best low-tech solution. A second possibility, one that happens a lot if you're talking about your employment and work you're doing for work, is your IT department may have already solved this for you. For example, at universities, if all of your folders and files and things are on a shared drive somewhere, or something that the university has provided for you, and it's almost certainly this, it's often the same in companies, things like that, the IT department will have a backup service, so you will be able to go and recover files, and those things go back a long way in time. So you can actually go back and recover, the daily snapshots, say, that your employer took several months ago or something. Those things are often stored though on these big, old-fashioned magnetic, not old-fashioned, they're still in use, they're useful things, magnetic tape storage things. So it's not a practical day-to-day solution. Like, your employer backups that they make for you, those are really the solutions to the huge mistake problem. If you've made a huge mistake and you realize that you don't have any other way of recovering your files, your employer will often have long-term backups, long-term archives somewhere that you can, go and say, please, lovely IT people, please help me. That is often a solution to some part of the problem. But if you're trying to just browse through it, most of the time, something like Time Machine is your better bet. The final answer that I'm going to mention, but not describe at all in these talks, is proper version control. So if you're using a system like Git or GitHub, it will give you really nice fine-grained control over all of those sort of things, all your file history, all of your edits, nicely documented, everything. But that is a massive topic in itself. I'm merely calling your attention to it as a kind of, eventually you might want to look at learning Git and GitHub as the way to solve the time machine problem. Okay, so we're almost done. But I want to say something about how do you organize, those are sort of the tools that you want to keep in mind when organizing your projects, but what kind of folder structure should you use? And the answer to this is, don't know. Everybody has different different approaches. I mean, for example, I have two separate systems depending on whether I am including whether I have my project in Dropbox or if I'm using GitHub for it, and there's a reason for that. The kinds of things that I typically do with GitHub tend to be quite different projects to the ones that I decide to use Dropbox for. And the workflow is different, so I've just kept these two folders separated from the start. And so I even started thinking about this as Dropbox land and GitHub land, and each of those are separate places with their own rules, and so I have slightly different structures for both. So I'll show you both of these as a way of illustrating how I do it. So inside Dropbox land, I have a work folder which has all of my work-related projects. Some of them are administrative things, so this is things like managing grants or just remembering project codes for finances and things like that. I've got cheat sheets, which is my quick go-to, like high frequency things I use all the time, and so just go grab this, cut and paste, chuck it out again. So there's a separate folder for those. Projects is my main folder for kind of things like research projects usually, and then there's a separate folder for my teaching projects. And then if I opened up each of those, you would find lots of individual folders, and each folder would be a separate teaching project or a separate research project or whatever. Okay, a key thing to notice is archives. Archives are so useful. I feel like I have learned this lesson over the years, where eventually I complete a project, right? And I will have hundreds of projects that I have completed over the last 20 years of doing stuff. What do I do with them when they're finished? Do I delete them? There are a couple of things I want to talk about with archiving. One of them is firstly private archiving, which is just what do I do myself? And that's what's in this archives folder. And all I do is just say, okay, this project is done. I zip it up, I chuck it inside the archives folder, and there's a separate archiver every year. It starts at 1998, and inside the 1998 folder, there are all the projects that I archived in 1998. There's one for 1999, one for 2000, going all the way up to the present day. So yes, I have a whole lot of archives in there. And also, yes, I'm getting old. Sigh, that's sad. That is my personal private archiving. Often, if you want to archive in a way that is publicly accessible for other people to use, that is an entirely separate process, and that's not something I'm going to talk about in this video. But I wanted to highlight that I have my private archives, and then there's the public-facing archives for finished projects, and that's things like GitHub, OSF, like the open source project, Open Science Foundation. I keep getting that wrong. Open Science Foundation, that kind of stuff. What you'll see over here, on GitHub, I have a slightly different structure because, I've got things about artwork versus projects, sites, slides, and all that kind of stuff. It's a similar organization, but it's not the same. And yours might be different too. Like, frankly, you're not doing the exact same kind of thing as me. You will organize your projects differently. And the main principle is just think about it. Spend a bit of time thinking about how you're going to organize your projects, because it will turn out to be worthwhile. That's basically the main thing I wanted to say about that. A couple of final points before I stop. Remember how, so I've kind of done this thing where I've separated out the organization within a project, like how a project itself is organized, and the organization across projects. And I've tried to treat these as much as possible as completely separate subjects. And there's a reason I'm doing that. And fundamentally, it's that an individual project should not care where it lives. So, for example, suppose I have a project that I have called Floof. My 8-year-old daughter gave me the name. She said that, yep, your project is called Floof. And currently, for some reason, my project lives it's in my Dropbox folder, so it's Dropbox/Floof. It should not matter when I move it. So if I move Floof from Dropbox land to GitHub land, will everything still work? What happens if I take it off my current machine, and so now it's now going to be on a Windows, on another machine? Will it still work? What if that machine uses a different operating system, like Windows? Does my project still do what it's supposed to do? This is an important principle. And I'm not going to solve that. I'm going to kind of say that, hey, this is another one of those project management questions that you do need to think about at some point, but it's a bit beyond the scope of this introductory thing. And there are tools that you can use to make sure that your projects are robust in that sense of the term. But I will leave that one till later. And thankfully, we're done. That's everything I wanted to say on this subject in this series. I hope it's been useful. The main thing I wanted to get across to you is that you can think about these things systematically, and it helps you a lot to do. So go out there, explore, go forth, be organized, and use fabulous names. And I'll stop there. Thank you.